You're listening to Tapestry, a podcast by a music lover for music lovers. I'm your host, Kelly. Join me as I learn more about the common thread that weaves between our lives, music. Welcome to episode number 1 of Tapestry. On this episode, I talk with my guest Eric Foote about discovering a metalhead identity, anxiety, listening to concept albums out of order, and Fisher-Price keyboards. I have my guest Eric Foote here, and he is officially my first guest. He's going to talk a little bit about his music and kind of where he came from. He records under the name Strange Dream, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about his album, but basically I know Eric a little bit, and his wife is here for the recording as well.
For emotional support.
Yeah, I'm the fan club.
Yes, so we have 3 people in this crowded room, but we're going to set this off, and I guess without further ado, welcome to the show, Eric.
First episode, so nowhere to go from here but up.
Exactly.
So that way.
Exactly. So everybody out there
I don't
probably
think you're supposed to agree.
Well, no. I am agreeing because you're right. Like, this is going to be a lot of trial and error, and we'll see where it goes from here. But basically, for the audience, my background with Eric is really just that I met him through a meetup group, like a local meetup group. God, it was probably years ago at this point, I think. It was probably like...
Yeah, I was actually just looking at that. It was 2013.
Holy hell.
Yeah.
Oh my God. That's... Wow. Life slips you by. Like, That's just insane. But we went to a Catatonia show together and basically have barely seen each other since. But Eric actually reached out to me about being on the show, and I happily agreed because I don't necessarily want to make this show about, like, hey, I need to find these high-profile people in the industry, and I just want to get regular Joe stories, and I think it's a great starting point. So, Eric, I guess what you've told me about your musical history thus far is pretty much that you started playing piano when you were 5, correct?
Yeah, 5 years old.
Okay. And... I guess why don't you just tell us a little bit about that?
So my musical history really starts even earlier. I would say somewhere around 3 or 4 years old is really when I remember first being drawn to certain types of music that just gave me an intense emotional rush. You know, think about like the feeling that you might get if you're listening to a song and they do a key change for the final chorus. So anything that really struck me as exciting and emotional, or at least what that means to a 3-year-old.
Right.
It was just something that I found really powerful. And in particular, I remember church music, for one. The church that we went to, actually my parents still go to, does a folk mass. So they do like folk-based music, and, sometimes they would do songs that are maybe a little upbeat, or sometimes they do songs that are in a minor key, and when your point of reference is Sesame Street, that's Metallica right there.
Right.
It's like, whoa, this is amazing.
That's true. I remember you saying that. I'm sorry to interrupt. You were like, I started playing piano, and whenever it went from C chords to D chords, it was like this drastic, incredible change.
Yeah, it came a little later because with my beginner piano exercises, at first for about a year everything's in C major, because on a piano that's the easiest key to play in. But then you hit level 2 and all of a sudden D major just sounds like the most dramatic thing ever. And I think even at that age I started to become aware that there was like this distinction between kids music and grown-up music.
Okay.
And there were a couple of artists that, I happened to pick up because my dad was listening to them, that I just latched onto.
Right.
Tina Turner.
Okay.
I was a big preschool Tina Turner fan. And The other one that I remember is John Mellencamp.
Okay.
I don't think I knew the name. I think I called it Scarecrow because this was the name of the one John Mellencamp album that my dad happened to own.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with him, sorry.
But I remember I liked Scarecrow. And, I got to a point where it was kind of like that toddler version of a music snob who thinks they're better than you because they listen to different music. If you can imagine, like at 4 years old, it's like, I
moved past Barney.
Yeah, you think I used to think Barney was cool too.
So did I.
Yeah, but now I'm into the Boo Bad song. I didn't know I couldn't pick up on any of the actual lyrics, but that was one Tina Turner song. That was Boo Bad.
Boo Bad.
So great. I thought I was pretty cool there.
Boo Bad.
And really, even my first foray into songwriting, if you can even call it that, was...
This is still when you're what, like 4?
Yeah, more or less, give or take. I had this Fisher-Price tape recorder.
Every great musician does, right?
Yeah. If you don't know what a cassette tape is and you're too young, ask someone who was ask someone who was born before about 1990 or so. But
is that how old you are? Like 90s kid?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So we're all on the same footing here.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's like the floppy disk drive. What does that mean?
Yeah. But basically it has this little red and blue microphone. You hold down a button, you can record sounds with it. You press a button, you can play it back. And I'm up there in my room using a rubber band to hold the button down.
Nice.
Sitting on the floor with an empty chock full of nuts coffee can and 2 sticks. So the carpet is my kick drum and the coffee can is my snare, and I'm drumming and singing my own lyrics over top of it.
That's great,
and
actually.
It's all like just an attempt at imitating, the grown-up music that I was familiar with and trying to just recreate that emotional experience.
And for comparison, here's other 3 and 4-year-olds with the same toy putting the microphone up close to their mouths and going and listening to the feedback.
Right. So based on what you just said, Eric, it kind of sounds like your experience of music has always been sort of through the guise of song writing as a means to experience, as opposed to kind of me, where I'm like, I really don't have the knack for writing, but I have the knack for recreating or covering. So you kind of picked up on the whole songwriting knack very early.
Yeah. Well, at least the maybe you could call it the drive.
Right. Okay.
Of wanting to do it.
So the motivation was there.
Yeah.
And I think I had written down here, so you started piano lessons at like a year later or so when you were 5. Was that influenced by your church, or did your parents kind of like foist you into it, or did you have a natural affinity for piano?
It was definitely something that I wanted to do. There was never any push from anyone else. My dad was a blues guitar and bass player, and he was in this church group, still is even to this day. Mm-hmm. And my grandparents on my dad's side, and they had a piano. I'm sure I spent time, sitting there and just banging on it to make noise.
Right.
Other than that, I don't remember exactly what, drove me to say that I wanted to do it. But, I was lucky enough that my parents were like, okay, we'll sign you up. And they even got me, a little 4-octave Casio keyboard that I could practice on. And, for a while, I just was attached to that thing, stuck with it. And a few years later, and it was like, okay, it's pretty clear I'm serious about it. They actually got me a piano.
Best Christmas present ever.
Yeah, really. I kept taking lessons, all through high school.
Okay. Now, at one point, you switch over to guitar, but before I segue into that, I tend to think of piano, I don't know why I think of piano this way, like, I can't name pianists. Like, I can think of maybe a couple, but I always associate it with classical music. So when you're a kid growing up and knowing that you listen to rock and metal and stuff now, like, were there any specific piano players that you really looked up to, or did you just kind of incline yourself to that instrument and sort of figure it out as you go?
Yeah, not really. In fact, there was kind of a weird duality going on where, on one hand, I was doing classical piano. A little later, I was in my school jazz ensemble,
Right.
Doing that. And at the same time, I was mainly at this point listening to, again, being drawn to whatever I found the most exciting, which, started with classic rock, AC/DC and Van Halen, moving on to a little bit later my rebellious teen phase where I decided, that's old people music. I listen to Creed now.
Creed.
That's it's like
So
the coolest thing ever. But the point being, there was always this there was the stuff that I was playing, and then there was what I was listening to. And, I'll admit, sometimes I kind of felt like, I'm a little bit cooler than the stuff that I'm playing. These other kids in the jazz ensemble, they actually, listen to jazz and they know all these great jazz musicians. Well, I'm cooler than them because I know about Nickelback.
Well, look how cool you are now.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not that I didn't enjoy it.
Right.
I mean, obviously I enjoyed it, or I wouldn't have kept doing it. But there was always kind of this feeling of like, oh, yeah, this is pretty cool and really rewarding when you get something challenging and you finally are able to like nail that difficult part. But I know a little. It's like I know a little bit more about music than a lot of these people. And
Right. It's funny how jazz ensemble too, because I was in jazz ensemble for a little bit, but I was like not this virtuoso sax player. I don't know what it is about jazz, and maybe it's just the complexity and the theory, but jazz people are jazz people. It's like horse people and trained people. Like there's like a very specific niche. Oh yeah, well I've transposed the giant step solo 3 different ways, and that makes me automatically better than you. And I'm sure there's people listening like, hey, fuck off, man. I love jazz, but I love jazz too. But there is sort of this sense of, I don't know, I want to say elitist kind of tendency with jazz. But one thing that stuck out to me when you said, oh, I've kept playing piano throughout high school was, at least in my experience, and I went to a big high school, there was only ever like 1 piano player, 2 piano players. And I'm sure a lot of kids, they did classical training, but was that your situation? Were you like,
yeah.
Okay, Eric's going to do piano for
Yeah.
this ensemble, and this ensemble, because he's the only guy we had?
I mean, I went to a much smaller high school than most people. I think my graduating class had like 40 kids in it.
Oh, wow. Okay, mine was 10 times that.
Yeah,
So.
I think that's what most people, what most people's experience is. But yeah, I mean, I did that. I did my junior and senior year of high school. I actually did the school musicals too.
Always good.
That was fun. The one year, I believe it was my junior year, they did a play, but they had me doing like, it was supposed to be kind of like a vaudeville melodrama type of thing.
Okay.
And so they actually had me like doing like a live soundtrack, sitting off stage, playing along with...
Oh, so you were like the living version of the player piano, kind
Yeah.
of. Cool. What was it? What was the play?
It was called Bertha the Beautiful Typewriter Girl.
Okay. I've never heard of that one, but sounds
I was gonna
interesting.
say, I don't know enough about theater to know if that's like a name people would recognize, but...
Bertha the Beautiful Typewriter Girl fan club. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Okay, so that covers a lot of my piano questions, but of course, throughout this whole experience, I think what I really want to get to the heart of is kind of how music shapes your identity and what music means to you. I think that part's pretty obvious, but I'm always intrigued by what makes people pick the instruments that they want to pick. So you're going from piano and then you eventually learn guitar. Was there anything in your life that was happening that was kind of significant during that transition period that you think maybe is like I'm like in my intro thing, I was saying, I needed to listen to more aggressive music, and so I picked up drums. And was there some impetus for learning guitar?
So a little. I mean, it was kind of a combination of things. One, it was motivated by a lot of what I was listening to. Late in high school, I had moved up to, what they call new metal, Linkin Park and Papa Roach.
Me too.
And so a lot of it was motivated by that, and also what I would call kind of an ill-advised desire to want to be cool. There's this idea that it would make me cooler if I learned guitar.
Right.
I think I can say with some authority it really, really didn't. But
well, why? I mean, were you like,
a,
I got to learn acoustic first, but then I'll be a complete chick magnet if I learn electric? Like,
yeah, I actually started on electric.
Okay, all right, step one, good. Who were your biggest guitar influences? I mean, outside of new metal, because I went through the same phase.
Yeah, so to start out, it was Creed. When I first started learning guitar, I played along with a Creed album and kind of learned the entire thing. I had a few other albums by like The Offspring.
Yes.
The band is a little bit of an earlier point in time, but Bush, the guys that did like Machine Head and Glycerine. Yeah.
Well, Prize Fighter came a lot later, but I like Bush a lot.
Yeah, actually, I had that album, the one that had Prize Fighter on it, The Science of Things.
I think I knew about Bush from the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater games, because I'm pretty sure every Tony Hawk game had a Bush song in it. It was very like grunge inspired, I guess.
Yeah, so there wasn't any like particular names, like specific people, but it was like the bands that I was listening to.
Okay, that makes sense. Did you dabble with any other instruments or like have second thoughts like, maybe I should have learned didgeridoo?
Well, I never really got into wind instruments, but it was basically, anything that had any sort of keyboard type layout, xylophone. I think it would be cool to be able to play violin. That's kind of one that's always been on my list of like, I would think it would be cool to learn that and
you got time.
Try it out.
Yeah, you have time. Well, did you end up getting into the percussive side of keyboard? Did you play mallets or anything?
For a little while, yeah, in middle school.
How hard is that to transition from tapping stuff with your fingers to holding sticks that tap the same keys? I'm a drummer, but I am not a rhythmic percussionist.
It really depends on what you're trying to do with it. For the most part, it's pretty easy. Sometimes if you're doing anything that's like running up or down a scale, then you end up having to kind of put your hands over top of each other because you're going in one direction instead of going back and forth.
My experience with the mallet percussion is always like drum corps marching band people who have like 3 sticks in each hand and they're just like seamlessly running over the keys. So you were never in marching band or anything, right? I was going to say, how the hell would you be unless you were...
Yeah, my school wasn't big enough to have had that.
Oh, that makes me sad. That makes me sad, but hey, whatever. So after you started learning guitar, you're influenced by the bands you're listening to. That's what, late high school still?
Late high school, yeah.
Were you treating guitar like how piano was, where it was sort of an avenue for your self-expression, and also slightly like it's going to make me a chick magnet, or did you start to develop these greater aspirations for what guitar could do for you? Like, did you want to be in a band and all this sort of stuff?
Yeah, so that came pretty quickly. That really came with, it's kind of a few different things all rolled into one that all happened pretty quickly after each other. I mean, first was discovering metal for the first time. That was senior year of high school.
Wow, late bloomer.
Yeah, really. Actually, probably even later, considering what I was listening to that I was defining as metal at the time, because it really all started with satellite radio. That was my Christmas present, December of 2004.
Okay.
This was before it was in like standard in all the cars and everything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was like a new thing.
Yeah.
And among the stations on there, you know, they had a heavy metal station, which was a term that I was only kind of vaguely familiar with. I don't think I even really knew what it meant at the time. And
Right.
I'd try it out, get scared by what I heard, and switch it to something else. And then, but for some reason, I kept going back to it a couple times. Yeah. And I do remember like the first song that came on that station that made me start thinking, oh, okay, you know, I can get into this.
Drum roll, please, because I wish I remembered my first moment.
It was Not Ready to Die by Demon Hunter.
Okay. That's a hell of
even like by metal standards, it's pretty tame.
It is, but when you're not listening to any of that stuff, just boom, thrust you right into Demon Hunter.
I was going to say, like, from a metal purist perspective, it's like, oh, Demon Hunter, that's not even real metal. And then when college came along, you know, that was the next year, that actually kind of became like a tie to something familiar because, you know, I was going to get into this a little bit later when talking about, you know, what songwriting means for me now, but I've had, you know, issues with anxiety and depression for most of my life, and making that transition from high school to college was hard. You know, I went to college in Pittsburgh, grew up in Rochester, so it was...
Oh, my coworkers from up there.
Oh.
Yeah, kind of country. A little bit country, suburby. So, did you go to Pitt? Or
no, Carnegie Mellon.
Carnegie Mellon, okay.
It was 5 hours away, but, you know, I had that little piece of familiarity. Could be in my dorm room doing my homework, with the satellite radio playing, you know, just like I would do during my senior year in high school. And so metal kind of became like something that felt familiar. And one thing that I did start doing at that point was also, you know, I'd be listening to these bands and kind of doing that thing where like the thought bubble appears above my head and like you see them on stage, except, you know, I'm replacing one of the guitar players, and I'm going like, yes. I want to do that.
What was your major at Carnegie Mellon? And
computer science.
Okay, I'm just putting this out here for anybody listening. You have to be extremely freaking smart to get into Carnegie Mellon. So there's a genius 3 feet away from me right now. That's impressive for one thing, but that's actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that might open up a whole nother discussion about the whole left brain, right brain thing. Like, I would be really curious to know how many other computer science majors are also metalheads. I wonder if there's a connection, but I'll let you keep talking about
many
that. Really?
Not that I know of anyway.
Okay.
I mean, maybe there's a bunch out there, but nobody that
I'm just imagining like some Devo like band where you guys like all code your own introduction on stage, and like a robot comes out and starts playing everything for you, and then you just walk off stage. You're like, oh, we just programmed it to do this. But okay, so metal was your connection to home, and that gave you a sense of place, I guess.
Yeah, somewhat.
Okay. Did you find any friends at Carnegie Mellon that were into the same stuff? Actually,
yeah, there was a couple, and I met a couple people who were also metal fans. That's when I had my first metal concert experience. That was my freshman year of college on my 19th birthday.
Nice.
It was Opeth at Mr. Small's Theater.
Beautiful.
They just released Ghost Reveries. We're touring, for that.
I like how you went from Demon Hunter to just diving right into Opeth.
Oh yeah.
That's kind of a change.
We got there early to see the opening act too, so we were like right up front because we got there and nobody. And the opening act was the Devin Townsend band.
Yes,
this little somewhat unknown artist named Devin Townsend.
just
happened to be
this guy.
Yeah,
just Devin Townsend. It's no big deal. Wow, I didn't even know they toured together. That's I mean, granted, he has like 50 different bands, but still, wow. Shit, why wasn't I at that show? I'm sad I wasn't at that show. That's wait, you said this was what year?
2006.
Right. Okay, I was thinking
February
back to when that album came out. Oh, damn.
I know, Ghost Reveries is 13 years old now, too.
It's a great album, though. It really is. That's, oh, man. See, I'm so envious that you're like, all right, I have this cataloged experience. This is the first metal show I went to, and this is, here's my little library of memories surrounding it. So I'm gonna guess that next you left the Opeth concert, and at some point you join and I quote, terrible death metal band.
Yeah, well, it took a few attempts because as much as like I really wanted to do it, I really had no follow through. So I would find a few people through Facebook, start making plans like, we're gonna do this,
right?
But then like never actually, put effort into it, and would fall apart. But
you just had a constantly ever changing lineup.
Yeah.
Okay.
But junior year, somebody else we had like this whole internal message board for CMU students. Somebody posted like, I'd like to make a metal band. This guy was a sophomore. I was a junior. And I just responded to it saying, yeah, I'd like to do that. And this time it actually stuck.
Nice.
We
what was the name of this terrible death metal band?
Well, first of all, I want to kind of backtrack a little bit just in case any of these people, they were all great people that I was in it with. Mm-hmm. I think it was really, most of it came from like I was in this awkward phase in my songwriting where I really wanted to write in this style, but I hadn't really figured out like the conventions or like how to really do it. I mean, not that songwriting has to have rules, but
But you mean like the music theory, the general counterpoint melody,
if you're going for a certain feel for something that you want it to be like a serious, intense metal song, one of the first things that I did when attempting to write in this style was writing something that had like growled vocals over what you would call a doo-wop chord progression. You might recognize it's like the heart and soul chord progression.
Oh, yeah.
Boom,
okay.
boom, boom, boom,
right.
boom, boom. And it, like if you're Mr. Bungle or someone trying to do something really like out there, okay, but if you're trying to imitate bands like Opeth and
was a doo-wop
Trivium, who I was also really Between the Buried and Me.
Yeah, back also, when they were like deathcore.
Yeah, that's not really going to work. So,
you were truly progressive ahead of your time.
So, a lot of it came from just, me having like these awkward songwriting and also just wanting to jump all over everybody else's ideas. Like someone else would write something and I'd be like, oh yeah, we'll do that, but then we'll do this.
So you sort of wanted to take the leadership role. Okay.
I mean, I was the oldest one. Everybody else was sophomores or freshmen. So, but we started out. We had a vocalist, 2 guitars, and a drummer. Our first gig was at a talent show. It was the School of Computer Science talent show.
Yes,
I was
brought the goddamn place
I was the only
down.
computer science major in the group. The other guys were. One of them was, I think the other guys were engineering. I apologize if any of you are listening and I forgot your majors. But I think I got that right. And we did our thing. I was so terrified. I didn't look at the audience once. My vision kind of followed like the circle. I could look on the floor to my left or right or up at the ceiling, but never straight ahead.
No eye contact. What were you what guitar did you have? Was it the same guitar you learned
It's actually,
on?
it's the same one I have now. It's a Schecter Diamond Series.
Okay.
I remember going to Guitar Center and buying it and feeling like kind of like Harry Potter. It's like you're trying a whole bunch of it, but it's really the guitar that chooses the musician, And I just felt like that one was the right one.
And that's the same guitar you've had pretty much since then.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's meaningful though. But okay, so you're doing your gig. So like, where did it go from there? Did at what point and what's the timeline for the eventual kind of fizzling out of yet unnamed death metal band?
Oh yeah, we were called Sunderance. I forgot to mention that.
That's a really badass name, actually.
I thought so.
Why'd you break up?
I mean, the only reason why it fizzled out was just because the youngest members graduated and ended up moving away. We stayed together for a while because after I graduated, I stayed in Pittsburgh. Our vocalist graduated, and he stayed in Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. So we were able to stay together for a little while the other guys were still, in college, but then they graduated, ended up going to other places.
Right. Now, if things had been different, like, would you have had these ambitions for Sunderance, like, hey, I want to open at Mr. Smalls one day, or I'm kind of getting the sense that you were sort of the heart and soul of the band, and so everybody else was kind of like,
No, I think everyone else had definitely had the same enthusiasm, but I kind of acted like I was. I was the heart and soul of the band, and gave myself most of the lead parts, even though the other guy was better at guitar.
Now, as that's all sort of developing, my next question was sort of just mentioning how we had met. So, going from piano to guitar to nu metal and then coming into this metal identity, was there ever a point where you sort of felt like, all right, I'm in it, I'm in the scene, I'm a metalhead now? Because I think a lot of people who would identify themselves as metalheads have a sort of awkward phase where they're not sure what that is, or it's like very black and white. It's like, oh, I'm not sure if I'm a metalhead, and then you have the people that are like, Slayer! Like, they're just going crazy at all, like volume up to 11 at all times. So did you ever struggle with that, or kind of feel like, all right, now's where I found my place in this scene?
Yeah, well, I don't think I ever really left that awkward phase, to be honest, even though it's been a while. It is something that at this point I do consider like part of my identity. The same way that a lot of people would identify as being, sports fans, for example.
Right.
I definitely find myself getting intimidated a lot by
at shows. Or?
Oh, definitely at shows. This is so going back a little bit. So one thing I didn't mention was at that show at my 19th birthday. My first metal show ever. We were right up front. When Opeth comes on, at some point during their set, they launched into their song, their Grand Conjuration.
Epic song.
And I didn't understand what was happening, but I found myself get shoved from behind pretty hard. I bounced back and actually fell backwards. Had this brief moment, for about a quarter second thinking, oh my God, this is how I'm going to die, and no one's going to know. I'm going to get my head... And then, two people immediately picked me back up, and I was like, saw what was going on behind me. It was... What I learned is that, that's a mosh pit. That's not... people getting into a fight, and I just sort of moved to the side. I was like, nope. Like, the blue and red aliens from Sesame Street.
Nope.
And, I still, if I go to a show that's like a heavier band, that people are going to be doing that, I'm, sticking to the back.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that.
With my earplugs in, because that was another thing that happened. Like for 3 days after that Opeth show, I had this ringing in my ears.
You didn't bring
and I was
earplugs to it?
Well, no, I didn't know that was like a thing that you did.
That's true.
And so, I'm freaking out. Like, is this permanent? Like, am I not going to be able to hear properly? But I'm glad you brought that up, because I bring earplugs to shows now, and I wonder if that means I'm like not a hardcore enough fan.
Nothing is worth losing your... Cause I don't understand that. I dated a guy, like, very ill-fated relationship. We were kind of long distance for a couple months, and one time he came in for a show because he lived out in like near Wilkes-Barre, like central PA, and he came in for this punk ska show. That ska was his thing. That's how I knew we weren't going to work out. I'm not a ska fan, but he loved this band called We Are the Union. And I swear that the ex-boyfriend, he was like one of like 4 people in the crowd. I was standing back at the door and he had no earplugs in. He was just up at the front of the stage, skank dancing the whole time. He was like losing his fucking mind. And I just remember like standing in the back like, okay, when is this going to be over? Yeah. And, you know, I ended up talking to merch people and stuff, but that's a really good point. There's no rule book for how to be a metalhead or how to be a concert goer. And I love that the metal scene is, for the most part, pretty inclusive. But you're right, there's no rule book. You typically learn that the hard way. So after that show, walk me through what your feelings were, because I know I get this huge high if you're moshing or not, or everything is just this very intense experience. Like, what did you feel after that was over?
I'm now at the point where I don't go to shows as much because, you know, nowadays I come back thinking, oh man, you know, I have this big rush. That was awesome, but oh my God, it's past midnight and I got to go to work tomorrow.
So true.
And oh man, I'm really tired, and maybe it'll be a while before I do that again.
I've gone to like 4 shows in the past 3 weeks, and I'm at the point where I'm like, yeah, I'm getting too old for this shit. Not really, but it's definitely an impediment.
Yeah, well, yeah, I saw that on Facebook. Like you're posting like shows that you're going to, and I'm like, oh my God, you're going to like 2 shows a week. How do you? Well,
this month, yeah, I have next Friday off because I'm driving to Akron to go see Ginger, see the show, and then drive back home.
Oh my God!
So I'll probably get back to Pittsburgh at like 2 or 3 a.m. And then I just remembered that the plumber's coming between the hours of 8 a.m. and 1, so I will probably be woken up by the plumber knocking on my door. But hey, it's worth it. It's worth it, and I always like getting other people's perspective on the concert going experience in particular, because like you said, there's no right or wrong way to experience a concert. And I always, as I get into the more intense aspects of concert going now, I always feel for the people who are there and they're kind of on this wild ride and they don't quite know what to do, or I feel like they're worried about like, oh, are people going to judge me because I have earplugs, or I'm, you know, putting my arms out to guard me from getting smacked in the face or kicked or something. Like, there's not a wrong way to do it. So, okay, so we share that experience.
Yeah.
You get this intense rush.
And, you know, it's interesting, you know, going to different types of shows, even just within metal subgenres, but also outside of that. You know, I've been to Haken at the Rex Theater, which is very off on the prog side. And, you know, at a show like that, everybody is just standing there, like, just completely enraptured in what's going on.
Was that the tour that they toured with Thank You Scientist?
No, it was, they were touring with I'm going to pronounce this wrong, but it was like C2I.
Oh,
it's actually,
I think that's correct, yeah.
Yeah, it's a person's name.
Right.
He's from Scotland.
He's amazing.
Yeah, he's just this amazing guitar player.
That's kind of like the nerd show.
Yeah.
Am I correct? I wasn't at that show, but you're like probably standing there and everybody's like trying to bob their head. And
yeah, pretty much. And so I mean that's a cool experience. And I've been to shows at the First Niagara Pavilion. I've been to see, you know, Ozfest when that was there, and also Iron Maiden. I had someone, you know, get so drunk and pass out, and his head lands like 3 inches from my feet. He was okay. I mean, we were on the lawn, so soft landing. You know, I've been to post-rock shows. I went to see Mono, a Japanese post-rock band, over at Mr. Small's. And again, that's like, you know, something where everyone is just like hypnotically, you know,
kind of entranced.
Almost entranced, just kind of bobbing. And
do you remember actually I think it was at that Catatonia show, that was the show where they played with Cult of Luna.
Yeah.
Do you remember how terrible that set was? I remember
So,
how terrible that set was.
What
and
I
that
remember is me being really into it and noticing that you were gone and being like, oh, I guess you left. And then coming outside and
Sorry.
like everybody else was like, yeah, we decided to step outside because we couldn't stand I was like, oh, I thought that was awesome.
I think looking back now, I actually appreciate that band a lot, but that was before Mr. Smalls got renovated, and so they didn't have the restaurant, and they had like that little shitty smoking area out in the side, and like I don't like cigarette smoke, but I would have rather sucked in massive amounts of cigarette smoke standing in the smoking area than suffer through Cult of Luna's set, because it was just like, I felt like somebody had put a trance on me and I had to obey. I had to just stand there and be like, when is this over? And it's not too often that I experience a bad show, but that was one of those moments where the audience really plays a role in the reception. And of course I had met you like 2 hours before and I was like, I don't want to ditch this guy, but I can't take this anymore. This is terrible. What did you like about that show in particular? Do you remember anything specific from it?
Yeah, well, I mean, for the show and just as a whole, I mean, the variety of acts. I mean, Cult of Luna, which was, drone doom metal, following either Tesseract or Periphery, two bands that I will never be able to keep those two bands straight.
Really?
Remember who's who.
Oh my god, they're so different. At least that's what I think. I'm like looking this up now because
it was one of them.
I think
and
it
then,
might be
coming
Tesseract.
before Catatonia.
How did you get into Catatonia? Was it probably a natural progression from Opeth?
Yeah.
I'm looking this up right now.
It was, who was playing at that show?
I am. I have all my set lists stored, and I want to know.
You know what? It was Tesseract, because I remember the singer had a British accent.
Oh yeah, Dan Tompkins. Yeah, that was when they had their original singer, and then they switched, and then they brought back their original singer.
I was about to bring out my metal nerd and be like, actually, I think Dan Tompkins had joined Sky Harbor at that point, and
I think you are correct.
They had a new singer, and I'm pushing up my glasses, going.
Yeah. Eric Emery is their new singer now, but I gotta see. Yeah, that. You're right. That was 2013, and that was with.
Yeah, Tesseract, Intronaut.
Oh, that's right. That was such a man. See, this is what I want to think about. Like, I catalog all my set lists, and I, get into the statistics and the nerddom, and I'm like, what's more important? Do you remember any specifics from the concert, not the, oh, well, I went to see this band 4 times.
Yeah. Well, I do that a little bit too. And if I'm going to go to a show, I go on setlist.fm.
That's what I'm on right now.
Yeah, I was going to say where you are now and kind of look up, what songs are they playing on this tour? And,
So are you a person who prefers being prepared for a show?
Yeah.
My man.
Yeah, definitely.
My man. Me too.
But, when it comes to bands like Cult of Luna, in particular...
Oh, I like that part that went, ah!
Yeah. First of all, people are allowed to like different things. That's okay.
Right.
Because, I remember I loved it and you weren't too keen on it. But, stuff like that's just almost like, I would call it pure atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
It's where it's almost, I'm going to sound like a jazz fan for a minute and say like, oh, it's not even about the notes that they're playing, man. It's just about... the dynamics of it and just feeling like, in the middle of this massive wall of sound.
It's funny how my opinion changed, though, because I really liked Caspian in later years, and they're a very similar band, and I remember standing there, the exact opposite of Cult of Luna, and I'm like, wow, this is so interesting. Yeah. They're playing, 3 power chords. Wow, this is so interesting. But it's about the experience, I think. So the concert experience is different for everyone, but... At some point, you're going to these shows, your death metal band has kind of folded. How did you use the experiences from the concert going to sort of launch your songwriting career?
Well, I would call it more of a hobby, but
thank hobby.
You for calling it a career. So it really started as, I made some attempts at forming another band. So I did... 4 different tries that all kind of fizzled out.
Okay.
And actually, I'll go ahead and bring my wife into this story a little bit, because this is.
I want to know. I want to know how you two met.
We'd known each other for less than a year.
Okay. This is around when?
This was actually around 2013, 2014.
Okay.
So right around the time of that Catatonia show.
Mm-hmm.
My wife, who, even though we both lived in Pittsburgh when we met, she was spending some time in Philadelphia, and so we were kind of long distancing it for a while.
Been there. It sucks.
And oh no, even earlier than that. So I might have to rearrange this in post. I apologize for that.
That's fine.
But after the band folded, I decided I liked writing and recording, and I started doing my own stuff, kind of mostly for fun, but kind of with this idea that I was gonna start a YouTube channel and things like that. Mm-hmm. So I started off recording what I might call metalized versions of TV theme songs. I did Walking Dead,
nice, Game
of Thrones, a couple others. I actually did an interpretation of Moonlight Sonata. I know that's not a TV theme song, but
popular song.
I called it Doomlight Sonata, kind of doom, and a handful of originals. But it was really that summer. At this point, we'd been dating long enough that we were coming over to each other's houses, and I brought my now wife at the time, girlfriend Abby, up to the music room to kind of try to show off a little bit, and here's where I keep all
Your dream has been realized.
Yeah. Some of the stuff that I'm writing, and she's going oh, this is so pretty. I like it.
You, Abby, you were not really a big music fan, or what did you guys kind of have in common outside of this?
Outside of music? Well, I'm embarrassingly a musical fan. I love my musicals.
If my fiance were here, you would be solid. You're fine. There's no judgment in this room. None.
That's good. Yeah, and we were talking about it, and he's like, you know what? I really like death metal, and he played one that had growl vocals, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm into the growl vocal thing, but it was Arion that
I was gonna say there was
that's very theatrical, dramatic.
There's a couple that I would say you tolerate, or maybe genuinely enjoy,
I really enjoy some,
or just saying so to make me feel better. Arion and Symphony X.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I like that. It's a lot of it's not so much the harshness of the music. It's more hey, I can play the guitar, listen to this really cool riff kind of thing. And once I kind of caught the artistic aspect of it, I really got into it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so you have your little music trophy room, and okay.
And so it was really, when she was going to be going to Philadelphia for a little while, that I decided, you know what? Yeah, while you're gone, we're gonna obviously be keeping in touch, but I'm gonna try to. This is kind of giving me the push that I need to try to really do something with it, try to form a new band, try to do something cool that then I can, play for you and to kind of show off a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, were you all settled in with a first career at this point, where you had the time and the flexibility to record stuff on your own?
It was really just a few attempts at forming a band, never really took off. And I started to think, I pretty much have everything I need to get started trying to do this myself.
So did Strange Dream come out of that very next step in your life?
Yeah.
You always kind of had that project in mind?
That's really when Strange Dream started. I started off, I was writing these songs. At the time, I was plugging my guitar into a distortion pedal, going right into the microphone jack on my computer. And so, it wasn't sounding very good. I was using a drum machine. Wasn't the best quality, but, I was doing that as kind of my way of composing. Mm-hmm. And I actually ended up, over the next few years, writing songs that fell into, I would say, 3 different styles. And so I sort of decided, well, this really doesn't work as one album, so I'm going to make it into 3. And at the time, I didn't really have a concrete plan for, finishing it. Mm-hmm. It was kind of like, the metaphor of, the dog chasing the car. It's like, I'm doing this. I'm enjoying doing it. It's kind of a way of being able to express myself in a way, because normally, I'm very reserved. I'm not usually very good at expressing myself verbally, so this is kind of where I can channel some of that into it. Right. But I don't really have a plan for how I'm going to finish this. And I know I want there to be vocals, but I'm just going to keep kicking that can down the road. But then in 2017, I found out about something called the RPM Challenge. Okay. And this is something, it's a website. They do this every year. So in February, you can sign up for an account on this website, and the idea is you challenge yourself to write and record an album, which they define as either 10 songs or 35 minutes of music. Okay. In 1 month. And there's no prizes.
No incentive whatsoever.
Yeah, it's just, probably because, you can't prove that you did everything in that month. That's true. But there's just a bunch of people doing it at the same time in a very active discussion board. The whole idea is just, to give you motivation to, just finish something. Don't worry about it being perfect. Just see a project from beginning to end. Mm-hmm. So that was when, everything that I was working on, I kind of put that aside, started something brand new, ended up writing and recording 5 songs. I ended up doing the screaming vocals myself, and then another user on the website did the melodic vocals, the clean vocals, and we communicated completely through email. I just wrote the lyrics and sent him that and the melody. He would record it and send it back, and that's kind of how the first Strange Dream release came into being.
This wasn't what now turned into your album that you released just recently called False Awakening, correct? No, this was a completely different project. Okay.
Yeah, so I officially classify it as an EP.
Got it.
It is 42 minutes long, so I could call it an album, but it's 5 songs, and I thought, well, I'll call it an EP. Mm-hmm. And then, that's kind of what gave me the push to kind of keep going with it and be like, you know what, I'm actually going to finish this stuff that I've been working on and take that difficult step of actually trying to write lyrics, even though I automatically write something and I think it's terrible and delete it. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to start, emailing people and saying, hey, I'm working on this album. Would you be willing to contribute some vocals to it? And it's really, so for me, again, someone who has a lot of issues with anxiety, it's a difficult step to take, but, I found after a while it's the metaphor I would use is like bungee jumping. I can say, okay, I'm just going to type out this email, but I'm not going to send it. So, I can relax. And then I can let it sit there for a minute, and then where the bungee jumping metaphor comes into play is that it only takes 1 split second of bravery, just enough to hit the send button, and then it's like, oh, okay, now I'm here. Now I've jumped off. Right. Gravity's doing the rest.
Did the RPM challenge, was that really the catalyst for this whole project? As a person who also has anxiety and has a lot of perfectionistic tendencies, I don't yet have that fire under my ass, I don't think. So that's kind of nice that you have, all all right, I'm just doing it. I'm just doing it.
It was real, because at that point, I had so many mostly finished but not completely finished songs sitting on my computer that I had stuff recorded for that, in order to kind of avoid finishing it, I would move on to something new. But just having done it once kind of like broke the seal almost. And it was like, so the first of the 3 albums, False Awakening, I just finished that about a month ago. And I have 2 more that I'm working on.
Oh, cool.
So False Awakening is kind of in a post-rock type of style, semi-instrumental.
I did listen to all of it.
Okay.
And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, with some instrumental songs mixed in with songs that have guest vocals, kind of like, I was inspired by bands like Long Distance Calling.
Great band.
Yeah.
Great band.
That, do something similar.
I did actually notice that, because you had like 4 or 5 guest artists on False Awakening. Were they people that you had met through the RPM challenge, or were they friends of yours?
So it was all people that I met online. There's a couple different websites that I used. So SoundCloud was one resource, finding people there, following them and being like, hey. I also hired one of them. So there are websites where you can hire people and be like, I'll pay you $25 in return.
Which website, may I ask?
It's called Air Gigs.
Air Gigs.
Airgigs.com.
I'll write that one down. Air Gigs. I'm looking for something kind of like that.
A little free publicity for them there.
So your next episode sponsored by airgigs.com.
So that's how I ended up getting, one of my guest vocalists was Eric Castiglia, who's actually from this Italian metal band called Solitary Crusade. That's
badass.
Actually got some stuff out there.
Oh, cool.
I also noticed that Adam Benjamin from Aviations is actually on there.
Oh,
and
that's sweet.
He's like super expensive, but it's like, if I wanted to, I could like maybe try to save some money up.
Yeah, he's a really good vocalist. I love their album from this year.
There's like great. A couple. Soundbetter.com is another one. But there's a couple guys on these websites that are actually like from bands that I would have heard of. And if you have hundreds of dollars in disposable income,
right?
You could.
No, but that's great. That's a resource just for people kind of just like you and me. Like, we have a passion for it, and we maybe don't have the professional training, so to speak, but you want something that's not thousands of dollars worth of post-production. And was there anything with False Awakening? I mean, even though that it grew out of this challenge, was there kind of a thing you were experiencing in your life that mostly influenced the writing of it, or what was sort of the overarching theme and experience?
So that's one of those things where it's like, yes, there are a lot of, personal emotions behind a lot of the songs, not, certainly behind the lyrics, and also even the instrumental songs. But a lot of it is like kind of a hidden meaning almost. There's like on the surface, a particular song might be about death or something, but in reality there's like kind of a hidden meaning to it that's a little bit personal and that I don't really feel comfortable revealing to very many people, but there's something you can probably draw your own meaning out of too, and that's great when you listen to something that it's like it might really be about puppies, but I suffer from something that I call anxiety whack-a-mole, because it's like when one fear is kind of placated, something else comes up. So I might have this irrational fear of losing my ability to be creative. It's like, geez, I don't remember how I wrote this song. What if I never have any ideas again? Except this becomes like a real, obsession. What if I forget how to play piano or something?
Right.
And so then that becomes, a song about about dying and kind of using that as the metaphor.
No, that's cool. Now that it's written, like, what has your experience been like? I mean, have you sent it to family, friends, or people have kind of found you randomly and said, "Hey, man, I like your stuff. Keep going."
Well, maybe not as much as I was hoping.
My mom adores
his
stuff. Like, it's kind of funny. She's like, I do my yoga too.
Yes, artist goals.
Yeah.
Mother-in-law does yoga to my music.
Yeah, she loves it, and she's like, I'm gonna share it with all my friends.
Well, okay, but that's a great point. That's really what inspired me to make this podcast was sometimes, and I will probably say this until I stop making this podcast, I have a lot of feelings, okay? I have a lot of feelings, and so I have to get those feelings out, or else I'm like a pressure cooker, and then the valve just blows off and it all comes flying out at once. And a lot of the time I find myself becoming a little obsessive over like, oh man, I listened to this album and it was just so good. It just hit me. Yeah. It hit me so hard here, and here's why. And I'm going to make you and your dog and your cat all listen to it. And I haven't really been a content creator for very long, so I don't have that experience, but I know personally that when I find something I like, I cling to it, and then I tell every freaking person about it. So that's great if you can get your stuff out there and people have that kind of reaction. Have you had any like weird out of the blue people like, hey man, I just found your stuff, I really liked it?
So I guess there was one. There was another SoundCloud user, who later on, he actually played a guitar solo on my most recent album, but he found me through SoundCloud. At that point, I had my first EP on there and some instrumental versions of the songs I was writing, and so he sent me a message saying, I really like your stuff, and we actually ended up collaborating on one song.
Oh, who was the guest?
His name is Andrew Holbert.
Okay, I was like trying to crash remember everything before you came over to record. I was like, I'm not going to remember all these names. Sorry, I'll just have to ask.
But so we ended up collaborating on a song. He did the guitar, bass, and drums, and I just contributed some like orchestral keyboards to it. So that was pretty cool.
Were there any major challenges that you faced when you were recording this, or did it all just sort of years later go, oh man, this feels really natural?
So it kind of comes and goes. I think you get challenges sometimes with things like, I hear something in my head and I'm trying to write it down and I can't figure it out and I can't get it to sound the way I want it to. And then I just get frustrated.
Right.
And then, I come downstairs and complain to my wife, and it's like, so I know that you actually had a bad day today and have something legitimate to complain about, but do you mind if I vent a little bit?
Yep.
Other times, a lot of the keyboard parts, especially on a lot of my stuff, is actually semi-improvised.
Oh,
so
cool.
Literally, I just hit the record button and I'm just playing along, just kind of playing around with some ideas, and I stumble on something that I really like.
That's what a lot of people tell me to do. Yeah. Just record everything. Would you say that's true? Like,
oh yeah, I would say the 3 pieces of advice that I would have be record everything. When you first start out, don't worry about having the best equipment and the best quality. Worry about getting something out there, and then if you really find yourself doing a lot, then you can start upgrading and growing into stuff that the professional audio interfaces and things like that. And the other thing, at least this was my experience, is to be okay with the fact that at first, maybe the first few songs that you try writing, I was gonna say, the first few songs that you write are probably going to not be very good, but I don't mean that as like an insulting way. Just you probably will write something and be like, oh, this is no good, but just not to get discouraged by that, that just like anything else, it takes practice.
That's all very valid points. I understand all of that. I'm kind of trying to write my own stuff, and I don't have a songwriter's brain, but I think that to say that is to also limit it, because I think at the very beginning of this interview, you had mentioned there's not really a rule for how to write a song. There's conventions, but there's not necessarily a guidebook you have to follow. And so if I can write music by twinkling my toes across my keyboard and it comes out with something that I enjoy, great, that's fine. I have most of the answers to my questions, but one thing I did want to ask, if you had to pretty much choose like 3 albums that you had to listen to for the rest of your life, what would they be? And because you were my guinea pig, I didn't write this down, so I'm hitting you in the face with that now. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Because I would have to really think about the answer to that question. Take as long as you need.
Okay, well, so I do have kind of this ever-changing list that I called the Jesus albums.
The Jesus albums?
Yeah.
Ooh.
But,
We experienced some minor technical difficulties. My microphone stopped recording, so please bear with us.
as early as junior year of college, when Between the Buried and Me Colors came out, and I listened to that album probably every day for about a month. But so one would probably be Ayreon, Theory of Everything.
That's a great album.
Yeah. Just anything like that can tell a story, have repeating musical motifs. And one thing that I always really listen for in music is something that it really adds up to more than the sum of its parts. Like listening to the entire album creates more of an experience than listening to any of the tracks individually. So I guess on that note, another one that comes to mind is Symphony X, the New Mythology Suite.
Sadly, I'm not super familiar with them.
Which I always, because I have this weird habit of reading Roman numerals phonetically, I call it the New Mythology Suite, because it's their 5th album. So, but that's another one that it's got this whole story to it about, it has something to do with Atlantis and the sinking of Atlantis, and the songs it's the only album they ever did where they really kind of interspersed the full songs with these little instrumental vignettes, just like some guitar or keyboard noodling for like a minute or so.
I use that word too, noodling.
Which I love, but some reviewers hated that, which is maybe why they didn't do it again. But for me, it just helps to kind of connect everything and make it into a full experience.
The album format is not dead.
Yeah.
Let me say that on air. The album format is not dead.
And then the third one that just came to mind, going along those same lines, is Known Learned by Arcane.
Like Caligula's Horse's vocalist, second band? Okay, Jim Gray.
Yeah.
Yes, that is a band that I need to listen to. Both of them, really, honestly. But that's a long album, too, isn't it?
Yeah, it's 2 hours long.
Oh, wow.
Across 2 discs, 16 tracks. Again, there's a whole story to it. There's a website, I believe it's Prog Notes, the blog. No, it's the blog is Heavy Blog is Heavy.
Oh, I love Heavy Blog is Heavy.
They do a series called Prog Notes.
Yes.
It's like Cliff Notes versions of concept albums. They did a whole thing on Known Learned by Arcane where they went through the songs explaining what it's all about. And that's another one where you listen to it, and the more I listen to it, the more I pick up on in terms of certain lyrical themes that show up again, like certain phrases that show up.
It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah. Melodies and musical ideas that are reused, in different places over and over. And then again, just the fact that so many of the individual tracks on that album, I'll say the one thing that I do is I actually think first.
What?
And then listen to disc 1.
Why?
Which I know is like breaking their vision. But
why? What's the reason for it?
The final track on disc 1 it's 23 minutes long, and it's just this massive like multi-part epic, and it's like just one of the most incredible prog metal songs ever made, period, I think.
What's the reasoning for listening to disc 2 first?
So one is so that the final track off of disc 1 is, the last part of it, but also, the way they did it is they kind of separated out by style. So disc 2 is mostly quiet, acoustic, like more laid back although I did do like that on a few songs. There's 3 songs on that second disc that actually suddenly get a little bit of heaviness just like at the end, where they bring in like the heavier guitars and stuff. And then disc 1 is like the crazy different time signature, like really heavy and really technical prog stuff. There's like a whole story to it, and narratively that's the order that it goes in. But I think as an experience, it works a little better if you start with the quieter parts and let that kind of build up, and then you get the heavier.
All of the prog fans listening are going to storm your Bandcamp with a pitchfork. God damn it, you're supposed to listen to it in order. Yeah. Who the hell do you think you are? But okay, so that's like an overarching theme that I feel with music. It's like everybody experiences it differently. Yeah. There is no right or wrong way to feel. And a lot of people I've met through the internet are like musicians that I admired and I just reached out to because, again, I have lots of feelings. And I'm like, hey, I just want to tell you how great this is. And then a whole conversation starts, and here we are sitting in my studio recording this because I felt like there were so many people who had other stories to tell. And I love hearing the motivations behind it all. But yeah, I think that's kind of a natural place to wrap it up because we're at over an hour. Is there anything else you want to mention while you're here?
No, I think I got everything. I brought these note cards with me with like all these points that I was just writing down throughout the week because I knew if I came unprepared, I'd just like sit down and everything I'd just sit here and be going like, well...
No, I want it to be a conversation.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we did. I practiced in the car on the way over here.
You guys are sweet.
Yeah,
that's great that you're here, Abby, for emotional support. Yeah. That's.
To be honest, I love hearing him talk about music in this way.
Well, me too.
It's just I don't know. I just, even when we were dating, I think that was one of the things that made me fall in love with him because he's just so passionate about it. Well,
yeah, I do, in the car because nobody else will let me do it. But if it's just us in the car, I'll have something on because I still have a CD player in my car.
Yeah, me too.
I feel like there's the overall arching theme of, this whole episode has just been like me showing my age. Like, I remember a time when you used to buy music at music stores.
The drawer behind you, that's all my CDs and my fiance's CDs, so you're not alone.
I have a CD player in my car and I listen to that instead of my smartphone, and but
look at my iPod Touch that has my Protest the Hero Fortress skin on the back that I bought off of rockabilia.com for probably $13 in like 2009. I mean, hey, whatever works for you, however you want to experience it. I do still buy physical music, so you're not alone. Yeah. I mean, I do pay for Spotify Premium, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
No, that's
I do.
Great.
I put a CD in and I start talking about it. I'm like, okay, so this is a band called Orphaned Land, and they're from Israel.
I love Orphaned Land. Oh my god, I gotta introduce you to my Oriental metal soundtrack or my playlist. Oh man, we'll have to hit pause and then just blab for like ever, or else we'll be here for 6 hours. But I love Orphaned Land. So you're like explaining the storyline.
Yeah. And they're from Israel and blah blah blah, and Steven Wilson produced this album even though he doesn't usually do metal, and
you're the perfect first guest because this is like I needed an outlet to be a giant geek about this stuff with, so that's great. Like what sports trivia and Jeopardy trivia is to some people, is music statistics and notes
Yeah.
and feelings to me. So you're preaching to the choir. It's fine. And you were such a good wife for putting up with it too.
I really enjoy hearing him, like go on about it. And I always say to him, honey, you should do a metal cover of this. I'll give him like little challenges, and some of them he's like, fine. Some of them he's like, maybe.
Yeah, maybe means I hope I won't do it, but I'm hoping you'll forget about it.
Yeah.
+1 to supportive spouses. My fiance is technically supporting me right now by not being here. She's like, I don't want to intrude. I don't want to like hear you guys recording. I'm worried it'll screw you up. I'm like, you're quiet as a mouse. You're not going to be anywhere. Like, you're not going to bother us. But we experience music very differently. So it's nice to have people who feel the same way about it that I do. Yeah. But I think that's probably a good place to wrap up. You said all you want to say?
Yeah.
All good? Okay.
Yeah, I'm just flipping through my note
Your
cards here.
flashcards, getting ready for AP bio class in the 8th grade. But, okay, well, I guess I'm going to close this out and just thank you both for being here. Thanks for being my first guest.
This is fun.
Definitely. I would love to do a follow-up episode or something where we can expound upon the great conceptual intricacies of that Arcane album, maybe. But for now, I'm going to wrap it up, I think. And thank you again for being here.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Thanks.
Please find him on Bandcamp under Strange Dream 1 or check out his SoundCloud at finite_automaton. Till next time.